Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amanda Hagedorn, and I am a registered dietitian that works for Midwest Dairy. I am joined today with Missouri Beef Council. You'll see Taylor Young here on the screen with us. And we're also joined by some of our other colleagues. We have Samantha Riley, who's on the beef farm, and my colleague, Ron Grusenmeyer, on the dairy farm. So, on behalf of Midwest Dairy and Missouri Beef Council, we want to thank you so much for joining today, for joining our virtual tours of the Missouri Dairy Farm and Missouri Beef Farm. While we wish that we could take you on this field trip in person, you'll still be able to see or feel like you're on each of the dairy farms. You'll be listening and talking with real life dairy and beef farmers. I do want to point out that since internet connectivity is not always good on farms, we do have some videos throughout the tour that our farmers will be talking us through. As far as the run of the show, we will be touring the dairy farm first. We'll have a short 5-minute break in the middle before we move on to the beef farm. So during the tours, please take this opportunity to ask all of your questions. You have direct sources of where your food comes from, literally at your fingertips. So just take advantage of this. I know you guys are all probably familiar with Zoom already, but you can type your questions and comments in the question and answer box that you have. So just to test that out, if you guys would just put maybe what you're looking most forward to seeing or learning on the dairy farm today. Finally, before we start, I just wanted to mention that we will have a post survey at the end of the tours. This is going to pop up automatically in your browser, and it will also be sent in a post follow-up email if you can't take it right away. But we would really appreciate you filling this out. It's not long. It shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes, sorry. And this really helps determine the success of the program, if we can change anything to make the program better. If you take this survey, you will also be entered into a random drawing that we're going to do. We're going to select 5 random winners to win some Missouri Beef Council swag, and also a Missouri inspired cheese box that will include some local cheeses, some crackers, and jam. So with that, let's get started. So like I mentioned before, my name's Amanda. I work for Midwest Dairy, working on behalf of the 5,800 dairy farms across the Midwest. Here in Missouri, there are around 500 dairy farms. I am thrilled to be joined by dairy farmer Sean Cornelius, who is ready to take us on a tour of his family farm, Cornelius Farms, near Hamilton, Missouri. One thing I want to mention about Sean is that he not only works on the farm to raise his dairy cows, but he also works off the farm as a nutritionist. Essentially, he's an RD for dairy cows. And I think that this is a great tie-in, as you all are future RDs. And I think that you're going to see a lot of the work is similar when being an RD for humans and for dairy cows. This is something that he will talk about a little bit more in detail in just a little bit. But let's learn a little bit more about Sean and his family. Did you know that 95% of dairy farms in the US are family owned and operated? This is true about Cornelius Farms. So hello, Sean. How are you doing today?
Well, hi, Amanda. I am wonderful. Thank you very much. We had a little rain shower a few minutes ago. It kind of cooled us off just a little bit. It's actually very pleasant here on the farm this afternoon.
Great. I'm excited to start. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of your dairy farm and maybe how you got into the dairy farming business?
Absolutely. So I am the 3rd generation, along with my brothers and I, to farm here on Cornelius Farms. 2 of my brothers left the dairy to go pursue other pursuits, if you will. Still have one brother here that likes big green equipment, so he takes care of the row crop side of the operation, which is very integral to being able to feed the cows, and some of the rest of the recycling story that we'll talk about here in a little while. My wife, Rachel, and I have been married for 29 years. It's always very easy for me to remember just how old this facility is. We moved into this dairy barn in March after Rachel and I were married in February. So 29 years old is this facility, and I've been married for 29 years. Rachel and I have 2 kids, Hunter and Samantha. Hunter works with Union Pacific Railroad, and Samantha is going to college at St. Thomas University in Miami, Florida, where she's on a golf scholarship. So that's really exciting to get to go and visit in Miami through the wintertime. My parents still live in the house that's a couple of 100 yards from the dairy barn. It's where I grew up. Rachel and I built our home literally on the site where my grandfather was born. My pool table sits right over about where Grandpa was born at. So deep roots to this farm, and so happy to be here today.
I love hearing about the deep roots that you have within the farm and being a third generation farmer. I think that's great that you can work alongside your brother and your son, on the farm too, which is probably pretty fun.
So interesting note about working alongside of the brother. Growing up, Dad said, as long as I can keep my boys 40 acres apart, I can move a mountain. And if anytime they get together, all I do is referee. I understand that as a father now. Same thing, as long as I could keep the kids going in different directions, it was a pretty easy day. But when they got together, hey, siblings are siblings, and then they're going to have spats and spouts. But ultimately, we are blessed to have a really close family.
That's awesome. I think anybody that has a sibling can relate to that. I know that I can.
Yeah.
I have a younger brother too, and we don't always see eye to eye or get along either. So
Exactly. Yeah, right. I say the brother that's still on the farm here with me is now 6'4" and weighs 300 pounds. And he's the one that I used to beat on the most when we were growing up. And I can still remember coming home from college one day and we got in one of our little brotherly scuffles, and him giving me a pretty good whop and me that, hey, that hurt. And I quit that. And now it's a lot of years later, and I don't pick on him anymore.
well, I was thinking we can transition now to see kind of what's happening on your farm today and learn more
Sure.
about those ladies behind you.
Absolutely, Amanda. Glad to do it. We are standing next to the freestall barn and the feed bunk here today. While it just turned fall, it is still really warm. And so providing shade, fans, and sprinklers for the cows, there's a gate right across the way. You see cows standing here at the water. There's a gate right over there that is shut right now. But an hour ago, that gate was open. The cows here are able to make a choice on going out into pasture or coming back into the barn where they can take advantage of the cow comfort protocols that we have in place to kind of mitigate the hot weather. Cows are really the most comfortable between 30 and 50 degrees. Just about the time you and I start thinking that we want to put a jacket on, cows are really getting pretty warm. And providing the shade and the airflow that these fans give, and then you see there's a water line over there just below the fans that actually cycles on and off at different intervals depending on what the temperature is. It's on more often as the temperature rises to get the cows wet and then let the evaporating cooling of the air from the fans cool them back off. We're looking in here at these green pipes, and folks might wonder, well, what are those things? Well, those are what are called our free stalls. They're called free stalls because the cows are free to choose which one they wish to lay in. Our cows are not potty trained. Cows are not really potty trainable. So the purpose of the stall is to orient the cow so that her backside is laying out in the alleyway so that when she needs to relieve herself, that what comes out goes out in the alleyway rather than in the cow's bed. Now, that's not a perfect situation, but it catches most. So on a daily basis, actually twice a day, we actually rake these stalls to keep them clean and dry. They're bedded with about 8 to 10 inches of sawdust. They're very soft, very dry, so the cows stay clean. And then we collect the manure out here in the alleyways, and that is actually scraped once a day. And then I think we've got video of us flushing these alleyways and keeping those clean. But cow comfort is obviously paramount for every dairy farmer. It's our responsibility to take care of the cows, and this is how we do our best to do so here on Cornelius Farms.
That's great. What are the cows, did you say, what are they laying on? What is that material?
So that is, it's sawdust. There is a local sawmill. It is a pallet sawmill. They take in local lumber and then turn that into pallet lumber. And then the sawdust that comes out of there, we are able to take our truck and load it up and bring this sawdust back in. We've got a special device we call a sawdust shooter. It's I'll describe it. It looks like a dumpster with a belt in the bottom of it. And we are able to put that on the front of a machine and scoop it up out of the pile and drive right alongside the free stalls and shoot that sawdust into the stalls for the cows to lay on. And then daily we have a big rake that mounts on the same of that front loader machine that folds out, and then it's got big teeth that comb through the sawdust to keep it broken up and soft and clean for the cows to lay on.
That's great. They look, the ones that are laying down at least look really comfortable. The other ones
yeah,
kind of
well,
look
sure.
a little curious,
Well,
wondering what's going on.
Obviously, you know, we've got other things going on here around the barn today. They're not used to a person walking up and down the side with a camera, so they might have a little bit of shell shock from being on camera here at the moment. Some of them will definitely be curious, but I see several girls laying around chewing their cud, which is something that we really want them to do. You know, cows have 4 stomachs. And the first one, the largest one, is actually a rumen. And that rumen is just an absolute miracle. It allows the cow to use a lot of feedstuffs that we would normally consider waste. The bacteria in that rumen can actually digest fiber that you and I would be unable to use. And then they take that fiber, turn it into energy, that turn around. And, you know, primarily here on the dairy farm, of course, we're very interested in making milk, but it also goes to growing a calf or growing the cow herself, or, you know, it's also how young stock grows.
Can you talk a little bit about what those dairy cows are eating and maybe how much they're eating?
So you bet. Now you're getting into an area, Amanda, that I get really excited about. As you mentioned at the start of the show, not only am I a dairy farmer, I am also a dairy cow nutritionist. I've been doing that for well over 30 years, and I get really excited. I go to other dairy farms around the Midwest. I even have a clientele in Australia. Haven't been able to go to Australia for a couple of years now, but love traveling the world and working with milk cows. So here on our farm, I'm going to get in the bunk here, Ron, and I'm going to pick up. This is what we call a TMR. In other words, a total mixed ration. And some folks might think of it as a complete salad. I'm one of those people that doesn't really care for salad too much. So I think of it as a KFC bowl, if you will. That's one of my favorite things. And some people think, oh, your meat and potatoes and your gravy and your corn all blended together. I said, boy, that sounds like good eats to me. And so this ration, this total mixed ration, is actually based on whole plant corn silage. And we're going to talk about what that is here in a little while. But then it also has corn, soybean meal, some distillers grains, and then the vitamins and minerals that the cows need to be healthy and productive, all blended into a single diet. The idea of a total mixed ration is to make sure that each bite the cow eats is exactly what those rumen bacteria that I was talking about a while ago need every minute of the day. And, you know, the corn silage is something that the cows like a lot. You know, we obviously talk about and think about cows wanting to be on grass. And believe it or not, the corn plant is a grass, although we take it at a kind of a mature stage. But it's something that the cows really like. And even when cows have access to really good pasture, they really like corn silage too. So it's something that I can help make sure that I get the energy, protein, and vitamins and minerals that the cows need for good health and good production into a package that they want. As a nutritionist, I always say any feed that I offer a cow that she wants to eat makes me money, and anything that I make her eat costs me money. So it is always a focus for every dairy farmer to make sure that we're giving the cows feed that they want to eat.
I love that point, because as future nutrition professionals that we have here on our virtual dairy farm today, I mean, I really, as a dietitian myself, I can really see the similarities. And again, when we're making meal plans as dietitians, we're not going to put things on people's meal plans that they're not going to eat, even if it's quote unquote the healthy, thing to do. So I love that point that you just made. I think it's really applicable to this group. We do have a couple questions coming in from Sean Scriba.
Awesome.
So I'm just going to kind of ask them now, what kind of cows do you have? Gurney, Jersey, Swiss, or cross?
So, very good question. And I know Ron's panning around in here to kind of get you a broad spectrum view on the cows here. And our herd is based on the Holstein breed. But we have been using a Jersey bull to breed our heifers for a number of years. The purpose of that originally was the Jersey breed is a smaller statured animal and tends to deliver a smaller calf. So that being the case for a first-time mama, obviously a smaller baby brings an easier delivery and hopefully makes for a happy mama right out of the gate. And we have been doing that for long enough that if you're looking at cow number 823 right here, who, bless her little heart, has turned around backwards in the free stalls to at least look at us. That's not the way the freestall is supposed to work, by the way. It's supposed to point her the other way, but she's just kind of that away. But anyhow, that young cow was born on our farm. And as you can see, she looks a lot more like a Jersey than she does a Holstein. So we have a very definite crossbred herd here.
Awesome. Another question that Sean had is back to the flushing system. He asked, what happens to that gray water that kind of went through? Do you use that to fertilize crops?
Wow, boy, do we have everybody looking at our script today or what? We're just kind of continuing to head that way, and so that brownish grayish water probably gets turned around and reused. It's a number of times. I would guess 17, 18, 20 times before we end up turning that water back out and using it as fertilizer on our fields. I say we feed the soil to feed the crop, to feed the cow, to feed us. And the lagoon is not a pretty body of water, but as a dairy farmer, as a nutritionist, and somebody who feeds cows and cares for cows, that lagoon is a beautiful sight. So I realize everybody might not agree with that, but the purpose of that, and we're going to show you some of the equipment that we actually use to take that water and put it back out on our fields. This equipment actually hasn't been used since springtime because we've had crops growing in the field, and that is actively changing as we speak, at least depending on how much it rained a little while ago. The combines are rolling across the corn and bean fields here on the farm this afternoon, and we will be using a device like this one. This is called a traveling irrigation gun, and I have a little over a mile of flexible hose that we are able to hook to a pump here at the lagoon, and then we can take take the manure and all the nutrients that were collected in that manure and put them right back out on the field. And we use soil sampling, and we sample the effluent coming out of the lagoon and control their rate going on to each acre of ground, so that we know just exactly how many nutrients we're putting on an acre of ground for the crop that we are planning to grow to end up with the feed stuff that we're planning to have for the milk cows.
It sounds like a very sustainable process. You mentioning how many times over you use that water. And I know you mentioned that you have crops on your farm and that you use that water to water the crops. Can you speak to what crops that you grow and do you use those to feed your cows?
So absolutely. So corn, soybeans, and wheat are our primary row crops that we have here on the farm. Nearly all the corn ends up back being fed back to the cows. As I may have mentioned earlier, my brother likes big green equipment. And so we have a few more acres of land to farm than what we would need to feed the cows. And so we do have some cash crops as well. So most of the soybeans and wheat gets sold as cash crops, but the corn ends up coming back and feeding the cows. And quite obviously, that's where we focus on getting the nutrients from the cows back out on the soil to grow that crop to feed them again. I get so excited about the sustainability of livestock farming in general, because it is a whole system, and when you do it right, it's a miracle.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned sustainability because that is a huge part of, it's kind of a hype word now. Everyone is concerned about sustainability. What are dairy farmers
Sure. Yeah.
doing to assist with sustainability? I did want to point out the dairy has the 2050 sustainability
Yep.
goals. By 2050, they're going to become carbon neutral or better.
Net zero. Yep.
Net zero.
Yep. Net zero. Yep.
Can you speak to more about the sustainability and kind of what that means to you?
So sustainability, like you say, it's a big hype word right now, has been for quite a while. Does sustainable mean that you have a sustainable business? Does it mean you have the opportunity to sustain this business for your family members? Does it mean clean water? Does it mean clean air? And the answer is yes to each one of those. And it means all of those to me. I want to make sure that, I raised my kids here on this farm. It's where I grew up. The water that we water our cows with, comes from the soil here. It comes, it's a ground-based water system. We want to make sure that the water is clean and healthy for the cows. We want to make sure that the feed and food we produce here is clean for families. And I want to be able to give my kids the opportunity to come back here and make the same life that I did here, and maybe raise their family here as well.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, sustainability is really important. So, dairy industry wise, the net zero dairy initiative, the dairy industry as a whole in the United States has targeted 2050 as a time where, obviously we're going to produce some emissions, but we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can from a feeding, from a land stewardship, a water stewardship perspective to make sure that we're sequestering as even more than we're letting out as we produce food.
That's great. And you're obviously doing something right, being the third generation. So those before you have left the land, in great condition for you to take over. So I think that's
Absolutely.
great.
Well, that's it's a family legacy, a family effort, and something that we're definitely wanting to continue.
Great. I think we're going to head to the silage next. Is that
we
right?
are. We say absolutely. We're heading that way. So I mentioned, is somebody, reading our script today, and it's just a short walk here down around the corner. I'm going to try to pull my announcer's thing and keep talking while we're walking down the line here.
Maybe you can explain what silage is too, because I know you mentioned it earlier, but that was something I didn't know.
This is a concrete storage structure that you're looking at, and it holds what we call whole plant corn silage. So we take a machine called a silage harvester, a forage harvester, and go through a cornfield while that corn is still immature, while it's still got a good amount of moisture in it. And we chop the whole plant up. We're not just getting the ear, we're not just getting the kernels, we're taking the whole thing from about 14 inches off the ground, and then we chop it, and it comes into the pit and looks something like this. And very interestingly, to our dietitian students, the silage fermentation process is very similar to pickling. We are getting acids produced in this. The natural sugars start fermenting and lower the pH down to about a 3.8 in this crop, and that's how it gets stable and how we keep it. I'll go back again. We talk about cows should eat grass, and I've always said that there's 5 things wrong with grazing cows in Missouri, and not necessarily a particular order. They are December, January, February, July, and August. So how many of you mow your yard in December, January, and February? I'm guessing, unless we're talking to somebody in Texas, that's nobody. So we don't have grass growing in the wintertime. And then in the summertime, while it's hot, cows prefer not to graze. They want to be inside in that barn where they've got shade and air moving and water available. So we store feed for times when cows don't want to be out grazing.
Got it. So Molly, I kind of asked, I know you already mentioned, and you kind of talked about being a nutritionist on a dairy farm, kind of what that entails. Is there anything more to add? And then I have a second question about the silage and the nutrition of the silage. So that is still as nutritious?
That's still pending. Yep, absolutely. Still pending. So as a dairy nutritionist, I go to other dairy farms. I sample all the feedstuffs that they are feeding to their herd. I take those samples, I send them to a laboratory. I find out what the moisture content is, what the protein content is, fiber content, vitamins and minerals, and then we get calculations on what the energy content of a feed is. I take that information, I put it into a university-driven program, and I balance that ration for a cow that probably weighs 1,400 pounds, eats 100 pounds of feed a day, and I balance that diet to within 1/10 of a pound of what that animal should be eating a day. I always joke then I would do that, and then I'd turn around and I'd take my kids through the drive-through for chicken nuggets. So, I say, well, who's eating better? Are the dairy cows actually eating better? Or do the kids get fed better by going through the drive-through? I'm certainly not throwing rocks at chicken nuggets because I like those too. But from a stewardship perspective or a health perspective and a care perspective, we look really close, at what we're doing for the cows at every stage of life. We start out from baby calves, and you might notice that I picked up a bottle that we're going to take to some calves here in a little bit on our way up. That was our a good talking point.
Yes.
But when I started doing dairy nutrition work, Amanda, back in 1986. We balanced strictly for crude protein in the diet. We have progressed now to where I'm looking at specific amino acids. I'm looking at specific fatty acids, looking at vitamins, trace minerals, macro minerals, and making sure that those are all in line with the nutrient requirements of dairy cattle. For the stage of life and productivity of the animal that I'm feeding.
Very, very interesting. We have some more questions that are coming through. I'm going to ask Molly's first and then move to some of the other ones from Sean and Emily. But Molly wants to know, what schooling do you need to be a nutritionist on a dairy farm?
Well, there are a number of excellent programs in the Midwest. MU's got a good program. K-State's got a good program. Being a ruminant nutritionist, normally you have a dairy science background and then move on into specific dairy nutrition classes. I personally am an oddity, if you will. My college years were spent in pursuit of aviation technology. I'm a commercial pilot. I have been a flight instructor. And then I got into some really icky weather and decided that's not what I wanted to do for a living. And so I reached out to my local extension specialist in 1985 and said, "Hey, I've spent all my college money on learning to fly airplanes, and that's not what I'm going to do for a living. I need to learn to feed cows." And so I am an experientially trained nutritionist, which means my poor cows have been through everything.
Is there anything that you don't do? You have such a wide variety of skills.
Yeah, I've got a number of hats that I wear.
Yes, you do.
Sure. Sure.
Before we move on to calves, we have a couple more questions.
Yeah. Great.
One is from Sean. Is there a heat that's produced in the silage? And are you concerned with spontaneous combustion at all?
Excellent question, Sean. Thanks for asking that. There is heat generated through the fermentation process. We work very diligently to limit oxygen and limit water infiltration into a silage pack. Ron, you might scroll out or pan out and look at the silage bags right quick. While we're standing next to the calves here at the moment. Our silage pit that we were at, that concrete storage facility, is not big enough to hold all the feed we need. So there's corn silage in those bags. And excluding air and excluding water limits that heating that you're talking about and asking about. And as long as we keep moisture levels above 50% in that feed stuff, we don't have any trouble with excessive heating. If we get down to a point around 30% moisture, now that's starting to get about dry enough that we can have some combustibility if there's a sudden intrusion of oxygen. So good question. Yes, we do get some heating, but because of moisture packing and excluding air and water, we don't tend to worry about feed burning.
Great. Great questions. I feel like I'm in chemistry class a little bit again. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
It's exciting. Love it.
Keep the questions coming, everyone. You guys are doing asking a lot of great questions. One question from Emily is, does the feed have to be dried and covered like hay, or is it able to be moist?
So definitely this feed is moist. Any ensiled feed is going to have some moisture in it. As I said, probably anywhere 60 to 70% moisture, so a lot of water in it. So then it does definitely need to be covered. It definitely needs to be packed very tightly to exclude oxygen from getting into it. And we also want to keep the water from penetrating into it, because wherever water runs into, air follows. So we want to keep that silage packed and covered as well as possible, right up until the point that we feed it. We try to remove about 6 inches of feed from the face of that silage. Everybody might remember what the silage pit looked like. There was some feed down at the base of it. We will have that all fed tonight.
Wow. How much do the cows eat? I don't know if we covered that per day.
No, I don't. I don't think we did. Our cows, as I mentioned, they average weighing about 1,400 pounds, so they're big animals. Cows are most definitely not pets. I got a real ornery reminder that livestock are not pets. Actually, a week ago today, I'm very fortunate to have survived a bull attack a week ago today. So these animals are definitely not pets, but they eat a lot of feed too. Our cows are eating a little over 100 pounds of feed per cow per day. They will drink in a climate about like this, they'll drink 30-35 gallons of water per day. When it gets really hot, they'll drink up to 50 gallons of water per day.
Wow, I can see why you need to flush your barns a lot.
Yeah. What goes in will come out.
Yes.
And we do our very best to make sure that we capture that and return it to the soil to keep that cycle going.
Yes. So I see those baby calves in the back. This is
Yeah,
usually a really popular stop.
I'll bet. Yep.
Can you share about them? Like what's the process of taking care of them? How much do they
So,
eat?
so
There's a
you
lot to
betcha.
cover.
Lot to cover here. So the story is, and it just so happens that these two that are looking at us, believe it or not, are twins. They were born a week ago today, or week ago yesterday. Week ago yesterday, yeah, because Ron was here, and so yeah, these little this is a young lady here. The little black one is a young lady, and her speckled brother over there. They were born a little over a week ago, and I kept them here. We normally don't keep calves on our farm for too long. We have a specialized calf raiser several miles away that our calves go to get grown, and they do an absolute wonderful job for us. And since we're busy milking cows, feeding cows, and the row crop stuff that we do, that's been a great way for our business to go and end up growing super healthy calves. So like doing that. But like this little guy here that's currently on camera, he actually gets 3 of these bottles a day. You know, there's 4 pints in this bottle. He gets 3 of these a day. And come here, buddy. There you go.
Wow. What's in the
And
bottles?
so this is whole milk that's in this bottle. Um, the colostrum from the cow, the day that she calves, of course, she's producing colostrum right from the start, and we collect that colostrum the first day and make sure that these calves get a full gallon of colostrum in them. You know, their first 24 hours of life. It is critical that we get that colostrum into them in the first 24 hours, because their digestive system loses the ability to digest all the immunoglobulins, the good stuff that makes the acquired immunity in a calf work. You know, these baby calves are born with little to no immune system, and they depend greatly on that colostrum provided from their mom that has all those little genetic markers in that milk, in that colostrum, to turn on their immune system. So we focus really closely on making sure that these calves get a gallon of that their first 24 hours of life, and then to make sure that they are growing and getting some body condition on. That's a little bit of fat reserve. You notice, you can see this little guy's ribs kind of sticking out yet. Calves are born skinny for a reason, and that goes again to being easy on mama for getting here. So they don't have a lot of extra body reserves when they get here. So we start out feeding them a real high energy diet right from the start, so that they're off to growing well and being happy and healthy.
Sounds like
And
a lot like
yeah,
human babies.
absolutely, very similar. And at about 2 to 3 days of age, we typically start offering water. They don't really care for water too much right out of the gate. If it doesn't taste like milk, it's kind of icky from the start. But we do start offering some water first about 3 days of age, and then after that, we also start training them to eat some dry, what's called starter grain, and that tends to be whole Cheryl corn, some soybeans, and then a pelleted feed mix that's got highly digestible proteins and vitamins and minerals in it, again, to help develop the calf's immune system so that they're off to a great healthy start. And that rumen that I talked about in those cows a while ago that holds 100 pounds of feed, and this little guy is actually smaller than my fist. So it doesn't have a lot of room in it yet. And milk actually bypasses that rumen. It goes straight to the abomasum. So we actually want to start feeding those grains at 3 to 4 days of age. I want them starting eating about a week old to start developing that rumen to turn it into the digestive bacterial fermenter that will support this animal later in life.
We have a question that came in. Is it pasteurized milk that you're feeding the calf?
So this is not pasteurized. This is straight from mom. So
Awesome.
this is whole, raw, unpasteurized milk that's going to the babies.
Awesome. I think that this kind of gives us a natural transition to talk a little bit about milking,
Yeah.
and kind of what does the milking process look like? Kind of just take us through that.
So our cows come in twice a day, every day. Birthdays, anniversaries, sick days, holidays. Doesn't matter what day it is. We're milking twice a day. Milking starts at 5 o'clock in the morning, and then again at 5 o'clock of an evening. When the cows come in the barn, I'm looking at the videos trying to describe what's going on all at the same time. So the cows come in the barn. Obviously, they've been in the free stalls. Our goal is to make sure that the cows come in clean, dry, as happy as they possibly can. And when they come into what we call the milking parlor, which is what we've been looking at here, the cows come in and they turn right straight away from us. And we're standing down about knee level to them when we're in the milking parlor. You can see that there. And we take an iodine based spray. I say, think of it like betadine, something that you would think of a surgeon using, with some good skin conditioning in it. It's got glycerin, it's got lanolin in it, so it keeps the skin really soft. And so we apply this iodine solution to the cow's udder when she comes in. We give that 30 seconds to act on the teat skin to kill any bacteria that's there that we didn't do the good job with bedding of keeping off of the cow. Then we wipe that off, wipe the cow dry, and then we strip each teat out a little bit and make sure that the milk is clean and healthy and ready to go in the milk tank. And then we attach the milker unit. Cows vary a lot, like people are different body types. Cows are a little bit different. And so they have different milking speeds. Obviously there's some cows that give 30 pounds of milking. There's some cows that give 50 pounds of milking of milk. Our cows right now are averaging about 10 gallons per cow per day that they produce. And so that will average 7 to 8 minutes of milking time per cow. So we actually milk 12 at a time, 6 on a side. And right now, we're only milking 64 cows at the moment. That is down for us, but that's very typical at the tail end of summer. Hot weather's really hard on cows having calves, so we specifically target calving time to when it cools off. So we're just starting to have lots of little babies here. So our cow numbers will get back up to milking 100 probably by the middle of November. And milking time typically takes us about 2.5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, twice a day.
Does it hurt for the cows to be milked?
Excellent question. As a guy, I really don't know. I have an opinion, and I'll share it with you. So I think that they appreciate being milked. For the first 10 years of my married life, my wife helped milk, and after she had our son, she said, now I kind of understand why sometimes I get to the barn and there is a cow standing at the back of the holding pen ready to be let in to get milked. I think it's a pleasant experience for them, and have to use the analogy of a wife and a mother that breastfed our kids, that said, "Oh, that's a relief." So I think they like that.
I don't have any kids myself yet, but I'm a certified lactation counselor as well with my dietetics degree, and that's a great analogy.
Believe it or not, I didn't get shot as we had our son. Kind of as a dairy farmer, you mentioned being a lactation specialist. I kind of had to roll my eyes when the lactation specialist came in after our son was born. It was like, really? It's like, I literally asked her, I said, so what do you need to know? He was offended. But the reason I say I didn't get shot is my wife didn't kill me, for not referring to her as a cow, but saying, hey, I understand this process because we do milk cows.
Yes. You got to be careful when you use your words
I
with
yeah
that.
yeah
There's a fine line that you could
you
probably
bet.
cross.
Yeah yeah. I say I got close to stepping over that.
We have another question. Sean's heard that dairymen don't take vacation. So what happens when you leave? How many people do you have
Uh,
working with you, or managing alongside with you?
So again, very excellent question. And I did say a while ago, these cows are milked twice a day, every day, birthdays, holidays, sick days, vacations. Um, so primarily we are a family dairy. For the first years of my life, my dad milked, one of my brothers milked, or I milked. So we had three of us that could switch off. That worked really great, for vacations. Was good initially for football games and stuff like that we wanted to go to. But then as we all got older and we've all kind of gone in different directions, and Dad's 80 now, I'm still blessed that he is out on the farm nearly every morning of the world loading the feed that we feed to the cows. He doesn't deliver the feed very much anymore, but he still loads it. And then I milk 3 days a week. My son has been laid off from Union Pacific. He just got recalled, by the way, and he has helped some. But then we have one Mennonite neighbor that has milked for us for 12 years. I am blessed beyond words to have an excellent employee in Leslie Zimmerman that's milked for us for so long. I did just get back from vacation, Sean. We keep a timeshare at the Lake of the Ozarks. It's just far enough away to get away from home, but not so far that you spend 2 days traveling, right?
Right.
On the way out, and on the way back. We share responsibilities with family members here on the farm, and then depend on the one non-family employee to be able to let us get away.
Great. So moving back to the milking, we talked about what happens in the milking parlor, but can we talk and take everyone to the tank room? And I think we're going to show a video, but can you explain what is a tank room, and then what happens like after the cows are milked? Where does your milk go?
Sure thing. So, milk in motion. Isn't that a cool name for a milk hauler? I absolutely love that.
Love
Um,
it.
every other day, so every 48 hours at the most here, this milk truck backs up to our front door at the dairy barn, not my front door at the house, the front door at the dairy barn. There is a hose port that he extends a hose through that you can see there. And there's a plug there on the wall that gives him power. And he is able to get into that 2,000-gallon stainless steel milk tank where you can see that the milk has been collected in. Milk runs into that tank from the cows and is cooled to under 40 degrees in an hour from the time it leaves the cow. It leaves the cow at about 101 degrees, so it's cooled really rapidly to maintain freshness and that great tasting quality to start with that we all love.
How is the milk being cooled in that tank?
So this is hooked up to just two commercial 10 horsepower cooling units. Think of it as the same type of thing that drives the freezers at your grocery store. We do not have a plate cooler here. A plate cooler on some farms, the milk goes through what looks kind of like a big radiator. And so there is cold water running through that radiator, obviously not touching the milk, on the outside, just like the radiator doesn't let water into your engine. We don't get cold water into our milk. But, so there can be a plate cooler, and it helps rapidly drop. So you don't spend quite as much on electricity in your initial cooling expense. But our system was designed for a lot more cows coming in even faster than what we're doing. So it works really well.
Great. And how often did you say that your milk is picked up? Is it every day? Is it every other day?
At the most, it's every other day. There are times that we fill the tank fast enough that we actually get the milk truck here on a daily basis. It's really cool. I mean, think about that. You can have from the time the milk leaves the cow to the time it's in the jug at the grocery store is 2.5 days. I mean, it's so fresh. It's so great that the system is really cool and how well it works.
Yeah, I think that's great too. I think one of the first things I learned when I started working with dairy is how local milk truly is, and that everyone lives within 100 miles from a dairy farm, even if you live in a big city. So it's
Absolutely.
awesome that
Yeah.
that's truly farm to table.
It is. Yeah. It's so exciting. Yeah.
We got a question about how you maintain quality assurance with things like blood or contaminants in your milk,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the
Yep.
consequences if there is something in your milk?
So very interesting question. Um, so the milk hauler, each time he comes here, the milk is screened for antibiotics before it gets on the truck. It's screened before it gets off the truck, and then the milk plant screens it again before they process it. So antibiotics are looked for intensely. Um, for other contaminants, there is a filter in the pipeline that it screens out in anything that you wouldn't want. Let's say a cow laid in some sawdust particles and they were still stuck to the cow if we didn't get them wiped off, anything like that, or if there was some off quality milk. What we're doing when we're prepping the cows for milking time, I talked about putting that iodine spray on them, letting that sit and act be active for a few minutes, wiping that off, and then we physically hand milk a little bit of milk out of each teat of the cow before we put the milker unit on to visually make sure that we're not getting any off quality milk that might have come from, the cows are like kids on a playground. They interact with each other through the day. They will wrestle through the day. They're animals. They can get hurt. Not very often, but they can. And so there might be an injury or something like that might show up. But that comes from our due diligence of being sure that milk is under the quality control that we want to be able to be ready to go to the milk plant.
Yes, and I think an important thing to note is how many times your milk is really tested, which kind of brings me into what I want to talk about next. What happens when a cow gets sick? Um, there's a lot of information swirling about cows getting antibiotics. So if we could address that, and then also, you have a great relationship with your veterinarian that comes on your farm. So we're going to show the video too about that. But if you could just kind of give some background on what does the vet do, and is she there for sick cows, or is there routine checkups and things like that?
So we do have a wonderful relationship with our young lady veterinarian, Dr. Annie Anderson from Chillicothe Animal Hospital. She's here on the farm on a regular basis for health checks, well animal checks. We check babies to make sure that they're good and healthy to start with. We've got video here now. We're examining what happens when we get a sick cow. This young individual cow did get sick. She had pneumonia. She was treated with antibiotics to help her get over that pneumonia. And I had called Dr. Anderson when I first saw that this animal wasn't acting well. We get the animal in, we take her temperature. I got a joke. What's the difference between a rectal thermometer and an oral thermometer?
I don't know.
They taste different. So anyway, so we do take the cow's temperature. Yeah, I know that was a bad joke. Wrong with it.
We're getting people prepared for Halloween in a month.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Dairy farmer joke. Sorry, people.
Sean liked your joke. He said that's great.
So anyway, we do a first examination, on the farm. Obviously we're looking to see, does the cow look happy? Does she look healthy? Are her ears up bright? Or is she standing over in the corner and laying down and, oh, I don't feel very good. So we do examinations for some common ailments. I mentioned cows will get sick. If we get a case of mastitis, which will happen, then that's kind of one of those, it's kind of like the common cold, and you kind of know what to do with it after 40 years of living on the dairy farm. And we will use some over-the-counter type treatments for an animal like that. But if we get something that, hey, we're not quite sure what's going on, Dr. Annie will either come to the farm, or we'll be able to load a cow up and take it to her clinic, where we've got nice large animal handling facilities to be able to get in and get that cow properly examined by a veterinarian. We do have what we call a veterinary client patient relationship that we sign on an annual basis, just to assure our consumers that we do have a nice active relationship with our veterinarian, and that she is here on a regular basis, not just somebody just seeing, treating emergencies, but somebody that's here that's helping us take care of our animals to the best of our ability.
Great. A question about the antibiotics, because you mentioned one of your cows had pneumonia. So I assume that there had to be some medicine or some antibiotics given to that
Correct.
cow.
Yep.
Can you explain, does that go into the milk supply? Are we drinking that?
So absolutely not. I mentioned, the milk is checked for antibiotics before it goes on the truck. It's checked before the milk is pumped from the truck to the processing plant, and it's checked again at the processing plant before it's bottled or turned into ice cream or whatever it is. Those tests that we use are so sensitive. Picture that 2,000 gallon that 2,000 gallon stainless milk tank full of milk, and then one drop of like a penicillin antibiotic put in that 2,000 gallons of milk will show up on that test, and that milk is rejected. If that were to happen here on the farm, which it has happened on the farm, it never made it on the truck, it goes right out in the lagoon, and it turns into fertilizer that gets recycled and then turned back into plant food and cow food and to feed us. So I am super confident in our antibiotic protocols, not only on our farm, but as an industry, that we're looking really closely to make sure that antibiotics do not get into our food supply.
And there's a penalty, right?
Yep.
Oh,
absolutely.
If for some reason antibiotics do get in the milk, then you have to buy the whole tanker truck, correct?
Yeah. That, and fortunately, I've never experienced that, but I know some folks that do. If we have a cow that we do treat that is a milking cow, that cow is marked. I don't know if anywhere in our walk around in the cows, you might have seen a cow with a red leg band earlier on, and that cow with the red leg band was mama to the other calf that was in over here. So she still got colostrum, so she's still being segregated from the saleable milk supply. Any cow that's treated with antibiotic gets those red visual indicator bands, and that tells us while we're milking time, hey, something's up with this cow. You need to make sure that milk does not go in the tank, that it's removed and done something else with. And so that's part of our protocol for keeping antibiotics out of the tank here.
Awesome. Well, we're kind of running short on time. It's almost 2, but I do want to, there's some other questions that we have in our chat. So I'll maybe just do rapid fire with you, if that's fine.
There you go. I'll do my best. You bet.
Sure. So Ariana wants to know, who do you sell your milk directly to? Are there middlemen between your farm and the grocer?
Absolutely, Ariana. Yes. I'm a proud member of Dairy Farmers of America. It is a dairy farmer owned cooperative. I really like my milk marketing plan. So you might consider Dairy Farmers of America a co-op as a middleman. I have my days full feeding cows, milking cows, and then going and feeding other people's cows. So the cooperative does act as a middleman. My milk marketing plan is I see that milk truck back up to my door every other day, and then I get a milk check twice a month. that works really well for us. So yes, there is somebody, but I want to grant you every confidence that if you go into your local grocery store, you're getting local farmer produced milk.
Awesome. Thank you. Riley wants to know, at what age do most of your cows start getting milked? And at what
Okay.
age do the calves come back to your farm from the person that raises the calves?
Cool questions. Hey, you're paying attention. Awesome. So typically cows calve in for the first time at about 2 years of age. And we get them, so they start milking then right after they calve that first time, so at about 2 years old. I typically get the calves back at 13 to 15 months of age, so just a little bit over a year old. They're just not quite old enough to be bred yet at that point in time, and I get them back and used to our farm and used to our feed stuffs and finish raising them out from there.
Great. One more question. Does the cow that you use the antibiotics on, do they have to calf again before you're able to milk them again?
Very good question. And the answer to that is no. We actually never quit milking that cow. We just separate that milk from the saleable milk supply. When that cow comes in as identified as somebody that has antibiotics in her, we separate that milk. We've got a separate little bucket that milk goes into. But if you were to quit milking a cow, when she has antibiotics in her, she'd dry up. The gathering of milk in the udder, there's a lot of mechanisms that would tell that cow, hey, I'm not getting milk and I need to shut off milk production. But when her udder gets full, and moms would say, hey, that's that we don't want that to happen. And then also the accumulation of protein in the udder. There's great protein in milk. But one of the signaling mechanisms to the cow's brain to quit making milk is when there gets to be too much protein in her udder. That sends a signal to her brain, says, oops, enough, and then I need to quit that. So even though a cow might be on antibiotics and we are not putting that milk in the saleable milk supply, we don't quit milking that cow.
Great.
Yeah. Right, until she's dried off.
Perfect. Well, I think we answered pretty much all of the questions. This has been a really informative tour, Sean. Thanks so much. I know that I've learned a lot in just talking to you. I learn something new every time. I either go on a dairy farm or talk to a dairy farmer. Yeah. So I hope that our listeners have too. As an RD myself, I think it's really important to understand where our food comes from. And I think seeing this rather than just hearing it can really help us connect those dots. Unfortunately, when I was an intern, I didn't have this opportunity to have an experience like this, but I wish I did. I feel like as a food expert, it's important to not just know the recommendations, but to know the context on why we are making those recommendations. And I think that you can speak to that, being a nutritionist as well. So I hope that everyone feels a little bit more enriched and continues to keep learning. We will now pause for a short break. We're going to be traveling virtually from Hamilton, Missouri to Columbia, Missouri to visit a beef farm. So I just want to thank everyone again so much and for joining us. On behalf of Sean and Midwest Dairy, I hope that you enjoyed this dairy portion of the virtual farm tours. And if you have any questions related to dairy, dairy counts or anything, just let me know. You can put it in the chat. You'll get my contact information at the end of the tours. I know that you guys are going to learn so much on the beef farm. So thank you so much. And thanks so much, Sean. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Amanda. Take care, everybody.
Thanks.
Davin, are you able to hear me on the beef farm?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, everything sounds great there.
Perfect. So wait 5 minutes out?
Yeah, once the timer gets down to 0, we'll be good to go, and we'll turn it over to Taylor.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. At about
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Do I just like the question for Taylor to be able to see it so it goes on top, or do you do that?
You can do it if you'd like. I liked a couple of them, but you can like them. You can move them around, say there's going to be answered live. I was moving them as they were going on. So.
Okay. Do you just move them? Do you just put answer live and then it goes somewhere?
Put answer live, and you can click done after it's done.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wondered who was doing that because it wasn't me, and I wasn't sure if Amanda was doing it while she was doing it. But that worked really well.
Yep. So,
awesome.
All righty. We will go live again with everybody in 2 minutes and 45 seconds.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you again for joining us today. I'm Taylor Young. I'm the Director of Consumer Affairs with the Missouri Beef Industry Council. We're headquartered out of Columbia, Missouri, but cover the whole state. We represent all cattle farmers in Missouri by providing education to consumers to help promote the sales and consumption of beef in Missouri. I'm joined today by my colleagues Samantha Riley and Hannah Strain. They're on the farm right now with our producer, Davin Altoff. Davin has generously agreed to work with us today to show you all an on-the-farm look at a beef operation. Davin's operation spans about 1,000 acres and is located west of Jefferson City. I really enjoyed the dairy tour and I learned a lot. So I'm really hoping, and I know that you all will learn a lot from our beef tour as well. So Davin, would you mind starting off and telling us a little bit about yourself and your farming operation?
Hi, Taylor. Absolutely. And again, my name is Davin Altoff, and welcome to Altoff Farms. First and foremost, I want to say hi to all of the dietetic interns. I want to say that I value the role that you all play in helping society with our health choices and health in general. And so what you do and what you will be doing as you get out and about is absolutely important to society in general. And so I appreciate the involvement that you are going to have in your professional career. And I appreciate the opportunity for you all to be with us today. I hope you enjoyed the dairy tour. I'm absolutely sure that you did. Sean Cornelius is a great friend of mine, and he does a great job running his dairy operation. He's a fantastic gentleman running a fantastic dairy operation, and certainly Amanda and Ron with the Midwest Dairy Association, who I have good connections with and tremendous respect for. And so today I just ask that you enjoy yourself as we take a tour around the Altoff beef operation. As Taylor mentioned, we are a family operation. We are now 5th generation. I'm the 4th generation. We have a nephew. My nephew works for us full time on the operation, so he'd be 5th generation. And as we get into some videos here in a little bit, you'll see my family, my wife and my family are very involved in the operation itself also. And so just to start off, I'm going to talk a little about our family history, but kind of describe the difference that you'll see between a dairy operation and a beef operation. In a dairy operation, you saw a lot of cattle kind of closer to each other on one farm, most of the time on one farm, whereas on a beef operation, we might not be able to have the true interactivity that you had with the dairy operation, where on the beef operation, we're spread out over a lot of acres. And so you'll see some B-roll here in just a little bit of some of our cattle operation. We've got farms scattered all over southern Montauk County here. And so you'll see some footage of different farms that we have beef cows. But as I mentioned, this is a family operation and 5th generation, 4th and 5th generation operation. And I'm going to kind of show you around the headquarters here. This where we're at today is the headquarters of our beef operation. This is where I grew up as a kid. This is where my great grandpa landed in the early 30s. In fact, he bought this farm during the early part of the Great Depression. My family ancestors and many of our generations, when they came over here, they farmed in other areas of central Missouri before coming here in the early 1930s and bought this farm during a tough time this country was enduring through the Great Depression. We have had a lot of history on this farm. This farm started out as primarily a diversified operation. In fact, we had dairy years ago when my great grandpa started out here. This was a dairy operation. We've had swine, we've had hogs. We row crop some, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But we're primarily a beef operation, and I'll talk a little bit about the types of beef operation we're involved in, and the types of beef operations that you'll see, and that you'll learn a little bit of how the beef industry works in terms of the segments within the beef industry. But as we kind of tour around, I'll show you if you can see as we look around, everything around you here on our beef operation is all this land is Altoff beef operation. And we, as I mentioned, have been here for 5 generations. The interesting thing about this, just an interesting fact about this operation, if I'll get you to show the camera off to the west here, there's a schoolhouse in our yard. And this schoolhouse is where my great grandmother taught. It began in 1840. And my great grandmother taught at that schoolhouse, and she taught my grandma, who is 91 years old today. My grandma went to school there. So this is something we're very proud of. As a kid, we restored this schoolhouse and have local grade schools out here to have field days in our schoolhouse. But just a neat fact about our farm. But as you see, we're spread out over a lot of different acres. You'll see a lot of pasture ground, some hay ground. We do have some row crop ground. My family, I have been involved in farming since the day I could walk. And I knew as a young child the importance of farming, the values of farming, the responsibility that comes with farming. And so I've been involved in farming my entire life. I really got active as I graduated high school and went on to college. I continued to farm through college and really been here ever since. I don't live on this operation. I live about 3 miles away from here. And so on another farm that we own. My wife's name is Elizabeth. We have 4 kids, and as you'll see here in just a little bit, they are very active in the farm as well. We provide them the opportunity to have various responsibilities on the farm, and they're very involved in 4-H and FFA and very active in our farming operation. So on this farm, as I mentioned, we are a beef cattle operation primarily, first and foremost, and we do some row crop, and I'll talk a little bit about why we do some row crop and how that intertwines into our beef operation. We are a cow-calf operation and a stocker operation. So in the beef industry starts with a cow-calf phase. So you have a mama cow similar to what you saw in your dairy tour. You have your dairy cows or your beef cows. And so for us, we have about 150 to 175 mama cows. Our mama cows, we target them to calve in the spring, half of them in the spring and half of them in the fall. The reason for that is we hit different markets at different times of the year. It spreads out our calving period. We keep our calving window tight, so we have calves born relatively within a short period of window, but we have calves to market at different times of the year. Our biggest operation, our biggest enterprise on our farm, however, is we are primarily a stocker farm, and we back around about 800 head of stocker cattle each year. So, as I mentioned, on a beef operation, you have the cow-calf segment, which is where your cows have their calves, and calves are born. Typically, calf will stay on a mama cow from anywhere from 6 to 8 months. And about 8 months, 6 to 7 months for us, at about 7 months, we get the cows and calves in and we wean the calves. And I always kind of look at weaning calves. It's like sending your kids off to college. It's truly a transition for these calves. And so we bring them in, we separate the calves from the cows, we wean the calves. During that period of time, you know, as I mentioned, kind of the analogy of sending your kid off to college, you know, it's a stressful time. And so these cattle, when they're weaned, they are prone to potentially getting sick. We implement a robust vaccination protocol, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit, which is a disease prevention protocol that we implement with vaccinations and so forth, which help us to have to give antibiotics, but at times we do have to give antibiotics. So these calves, when they're weaned at 6 to 8 months, they'll move into a stocker operation, and that's what we do. So we have our own calves that we wean out of our cow-calf operation, but then we buy cattle that are weaned from other cow-calf operations from all around the state and even from other states south of us primarily. And we bring those cattle in and we put them on a specific diet that I'll talk about in just a little bit. And we typically, you know, wean around 400 to 500 pounds. When they're 6 to 7 months old, you're probably looking at a 400 to 500 pound heifer or steer. And, you know, I'm going to be using terms that I'll help as I go along to describe what these terms mean. A heifer is a female calf that has not had a baby yet. And then a steer is a male calf that has been castrated. And so we always buy, our stocker program is built around buying feeder heifers. So we buy heifers around 400 to 500 pounds that have just been weaned. We bring them in and we commingle them with each other, and then we'll put them out on grass and then feed them a corn-based ration for about 200 days until they get to about 700, 750 pounds. And at that point, they will go to a feed yard out west in Kansas or Nebraska or the Texas Panhandle. And in some cases on our own cattle, we do retain ownership in the feed yard. And I'll talk about why I do that in just a little bit. So the feed yard is obviously the final stage. And in the feed yard, cattle typically stay in the feed yard from 4 to 6 months, usually at about 750 pounds. They go to the feed yard. They're put on typically a corn-based, silage-based ration. And it is the process where we speed up the finishing product, where we're getting a fed steer or a fed heifer to market as efficiently as possible and as sustainable as possible. And it shortens the window to get that fed animal, that fed heifer, that fed steer to the plate of the consumer. So that talks a little bit about the segments in the operation. We again, cow-calf, stocker, and then the feed yard segment. You've seen in the video. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question. You talked about so you raise some of the stockers are some that you had there on the farm, and then you also buy across the state and other states. Are there any certain breeds that you all look for? Do you all focus on a certain breed, or kind of, can you talk a little bit about different beef cattle breeds and what you all look for when choosing cattle?
Absolutely, and that's a great question, Taylor. On our operation is geared more towards Angus-based genetics. As you saw probably in the video a little bit ago, we had some weaned calves that I was having my mom drive up for the video. We are primarily an Angus-based operation. All the cattle that we buy, all the cows and calves that we have are Angus commercial based. And when I say commercial, they're not purebred Angus. They've got a cross of some other breeds in them, but they're primarily Angus based. All the cattle that we buy from a stocker standpoint are all Angus based. So primarily all the cattle you'll see on our operation are black hided. We do have a couple red Angus cows that you'll see from time to time, and you might see in the video. But the reason why we do that is all of our cattle that we sell off the farm, if we don't ship them to the feed yard to retain ownership ourselves, we ship directly off the farm on what's called a pot, or a semi truck and trailer that you'll see going up and down the interstate. And so we package cattle in volume so it can be put on a tractor and trailer from an efficiency standpoint, and send to the feedlot in Kansas or out west somewhere. But it is primarily Angus based. And at any time, should there be questions from the dietitians, I want you all to pretend like you're out here with us. And so anytime if you see something that is of interest to you, or have a question, something I say, please feel free to engage and interact. Happy to take any questions as we go.
Awesome. We actually have one question right now. On your
Absolutely.
operation, are there ways that you work to maintain or improve the genetics of your herd?
That's a great question. I was actually going to touch on that in just a little bit, but certainly it'd be a great time to visit about that. So on our cow-calf operation, we do focus on high-end genetics. So data is absolutely important. So when we talk about sustainability in the beef industry, one of the factors of continuing to move the needle on continuous improvement, in fact, that's how I define sustainability, is continuing to find ways that we can do better, whether it's through better genetics, reducing the inputs that we're using. And one way we're doing that here on the Althoff farm and ranch is through better genetics. And so the bulls that we buy, or the semen that we purchase, has specific data on it, data relative to what we would consider terminal traits. So traits that consumers would be interested in, such as intramuscular fat, back fat, things of that nature. We also look at performance traits. So traits that would enhance the ability of average daily gain, feed efficiency in animals, which we're getting so good at in the beef industry, really in both industries, but more specifically in the beef industry. So performance traits relative to milk, cow's milk, her ability to milk and produce milk for her calf. And so we're continuing to look at those types of data, cow longevity and docility and the birth rates and calving ease. So, calving ease relates to having a live calf and not having a difficulty calving. So we're always looking at different traits that can help us improve our operation here to be more sustainable and be more efficient in our operation.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, as I wrap up our family conversation, this is truly a family operation and our kids are very involved. And as we transition into the next video where we will see my son Colin and a 4-H project that he did, we'll tell you a little bit about our feed operation, what we use to feed cattle here on the Althoff operation.
Hi, my name is Colin Althoff, and today I'm going to be showing you how we grind feed on our farm. Grinding feed is a very important operation on the farm. We mix various commodities to ensure our cattle have good nutrition.
I can move.
So what we are looking at here is the grinder. This is what we use to mix our feed and grind it. Our first ingredient is pelleted soybean meal. It is 40% protein, and when mixed with corn, our feed is approximately 13 to 14% protein. Soybean meal is the byproduct of extracting the oil out of the bean. Soybean oil is used for cooking oil and biodiesel. After the oil is taken out, we have soybean meal left. We have a scale on the grinder. We typically add approximately 1,000 pounds of soybean meal depending on how much protein we are wanting to feed for a given time of year. Next, we have the tractor moving the grinder over to the grain bin. This is where we add the shelled corn for grinding and mixing. This is corn that we grow on our farm. We also add vitamin A, D, and E, and calcium during the grinding process. Once we have the feed mix, we move it to the bulk bin. And from the bulk bin, we can fill our feed truck. And here's the final feed mix. Our final step is to put the grinder away. And now we're ready to feed. Thanks for watching my video.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that video with us, Davin. That was awesome to see how your whole family gets involved in the process. I saw some of your kids out there helping and really outlined what you all feed the animals. So a question that we get a lot is, there's people who grain finish their cattle and then also grass finish their cattle. Can you talk a little bit about the differences between those two and why you all choose to do grain finishing with yours?
Absolutely, Taylor. And, there's several different ways we can produce beef, obviously, and obviously different options when consumers go to the grocery store, which in my mind, consumer choice is a good thing, whether, you're purchasing conventional beef or grass finished beef or organic beef or non-hormone treated cattle beef. Bottom line, all beef is healthy, nutritious, and safe. And on our farm, we choose to feed corn primarily because we have corn available to us. We have resources available to grow corn. We have a corn and soybean rotation. We're not a big row crop operation, but it fits in well with our operation because we have a stocker operation, which is where we really introduce corn to cattle as in a stocker operation. Corn is a great nutritious feed source for cattle. It also is a way to add quality in terms of quality beef, in terms of intramuscular fat for cattle. That's another reason why we feed corn, is because of the benefits that we get from the cattle that we send to the feedlot have graded in terms of quality grade, whether that be prime, choice, or select. And so corn is a great source of nutrition for our cattle, and it works with our operation. We don't feed only corn, though. We feed other byproducts, as you saw in the video that Colin shared. Corn is high in energy and fat. It's a starch. Obviously, it's got some protein value, but not enough protein. So we'll mix in other commodities that are byproducts from other uses of corn or soybeans. For instance, we will use DDGs, and DDGs is a byproduct from corn ethanol. And so instead of sending the dried distiller's grain, is what DDG stands for, which is the byproduct of ethanol, instead of that going to a landfill somewhere, it's a great feed source for cattle to mix in with our rations. So we use that from time to time. As you saw in the video, the soybean meal that we were using, the pelleted soybean meal, comes from byproducts from soybean oil. And so a lot of what we use is the corn that we grow, which gets us through about the end of the year. And then we start purchasing corn. But then it's the other byproducts that we have readily available here on our operation. Our row crop operation, again, is small, but it provides us an opportunity to have a good access to a feed source, which fits into our operation very well. But two, we put out cover crops after we harvest our crops, and that cover crop will grow through the wintertime. One advantage of having a cover crop, it's really great from an environmental standpoint because it's pulling carbon out of the atmosphere through really a non-growing season. And then we harvest that cover crop before going in to put another crop out in the springtime. So really we're getting use out of our land year round on our crop ground, and we're able to get forage off of it that we use in our cattle operation throughout the year. So it works well for us. But again, we're primarily a beef operation. And the reason why we're a beef operation is where we're located, west of Jefferson City. We're kind of in the transition zone between very highly productive, fertile crop grounds of northern and western Missouri and the transition in the Ozarks. And the Ozarks of Missouri is where you see most of your cattle, a large majority of your cattle production. You'll see cattle production all over Missouri, but in the Ozarks primarily is where you see intensive cattle production. And that's because we have rolling hills and land that probably should not be in cultivation. It should be in some type of forage. And so a lot of the land resources in this area of the state, in south of here into the Ozarks is better suited for ruminant animals to be grazing the land, whether that's cattle, sheep, or goats. And if we didn't have ruminant production on these resources here, a lot of this land may go unutilized. So I think that's an important point to make. And really, if you look at southern Missouri and parts of the U.S., like the Flint Hills of Kansas and many parts of the western United States, in fact, I think 30% of the U.S. Land resources are more suitable and should be in forage production for ruminant production, and probably would go unutilized if we didn't have ruminant animals utilizing the resources such as grass. So, the feed we have here is, again, corn, soybeans, but our forage is a primary staple for the cattle production that we have on our farm. So, as we look at our row crop production and our grass prairies that we have out here in southern Missouri, one of the things that we take very seriously on the Altough farm, and many producers do this, is looking at environmental sustainability. As I mentioned, sustainability in my mind, the way I define sustainability is continual improvement. We look at soil health is an absolutely important component of our farming operation. So whether that be through fertility management, as you will likely see if you haven't already, we do intensive soil sampling both on our crop ground and on our pasture and hay ground. We enter into a program called variable rate fertilizer, a program that is a nutrient management program where we grid soil sample. And when I say grid soil sample, we soil sample very intensively on a 2.5 acre grid. And we will apply that to a computer program based on what those specific grids need in terms of fertility. And then we'll have our fertilizer applied based on what those soil tests say they need. So one, it is a great way to manage our soils. Two, it prevents us from over applying our fertility. And we've seen a tremendous response both in our crop ground, but also in our pasture and hay ground in terms of productivity as a result of soil health. We also, on our cow-calf operation more specifically, look at soil health from the standpoint of grazing management. And just in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen tremendous improvements from forage quality and soil health through grazing management. So we use a rotational grazing system for our cow-calf operation, which means we're moving cows every so often to different pastures. We've got pastures broken up where we move cows around from one pasture to another. What that does is that gives the pastures that are getting a rest from grazing the ability for the roots to go down deeper, for the forage to be more vibrant and healthy. And we've seen tremendous impact and improvements in terms of our soil quality and our grazing.
So Davin, you've talked about you graze the cattle, and then you've also shown feeding grain. Do you feed hay in your operation? What does that look like?
We do. We do feed hay. So our goal is to stretch our grazing season out as long as we can. We're feeding hay. One, we're feeding, we're feeding a resource that costs us money, whether it's through fertility or through the equipment that we have to use to bale that hay, whether it's the fuel that we have to use to bale that hay. So we manage our soils through grazing management to try to extend our grazing season into December, sometimes even January of a given year. We try not to start feeding hay until midwinter unless we get a heavy snow. And so we'll start feeding hay, but having hay available and feeding hay on our operation is absolutely important because we'll get snow, ice this time of year. Usually we start really feeding hay intensely in February to March of the winter time. The reason for that, oftentimes, we're getting later in the winter our cows have been through the winter. In February and March, we can get wet snows. Sometimes we'll have just a very humid, damp atmosphere, and cows need more energy at that time. So that's when we're really starting to feed high quality forage to keep their energy levels up, especially if they're lactating and taking care of a baby. That is a big part of our operation is feeding hay. So we'll feed hay anywhere from January until we start getting grass end of March, first part of April. So intensely for about 3 months. And we try to extend the grazing season as long as we can. And this year we've been very blessed with some rains that have helped continue to keep the grass growing. We're going into the fall this year with pretty good forage base. So we're hoping that we can extend our grazing season upward into January of the year. So as I talk about sustainability, sustainability is a topic that's absolutely important to all of us. It's important to you all. It's important to us as producers. And you'll hear me say often, and I have said it many times, I look at it as continual improvement. And when I think of sustainability from a beef production operation, I'm looking at two things. And I talked a little bit about soil health, soil management. The other thing I want to talk about is animal health and nutrition. Now, I've talked a little bit about animal health and nutrition, but and how animal health and nutrition plays a big part of that. So, you've seen what we feed our cattle and the ration that we feed that plays into a healthy animal. But we also implement a very robust vaccination program on our operation. So for the cattle that we buy and the cattle that we wean, we run through a program called Health Track. It's a disease prevention program, which involves 2 rounds of vaccinations. One of the things that cattle, when you wean, when they get sick, typically it is a respiratory disease of some kind. And so we vaccinate for the prevention of respiratory disease. Would be no different than like a COVID vaccine to prevent COVID in humans. So we implement a robust vaccination program, but from time to time, cattle get sick and they've got to be treated. And so on our operation, we will use and utilize antibiotics. We try not to utilize antibiotics because antibiotics, one, costs a lot of money, and it's very expensive to give antibiotics. So we try not to give antibiotics. But when we have a sick animal, and we're looking at either a live calf or a dead calf, we look at it as the right thing to do to keep that animal alive. And so animal health is a big part of animal welfare and a big part of this operation, and one that we try to be very proactive, as we look at our health protocols here on a farm. I mentioned a little bit ago that part of the cattle that we raise on a farm that come out of our cow-calf operation, given the fact that we look closely at genetics, and I do appreciate that question on genetics, we do retain ownership of some of the cattle that come out of our cow-calf operation, and they go to the feed yard that we retain ownership on. There are several reasons for that. One, it's another marketing opportunity for us to market our cattle in a different way. In fact, some of the cattle that I send out to the feed yard, I will run through what's called the NHTC program. It's non-hormone treated cattle program. We send them to this feed yard because it's a different marketing opportunity. We're hitting different markets, such as the EU market. But on our farm, we also use growth implants in some of our cattle. And growth implants are a huge part of helping us continue to be sustainable in our operation. We see 10 to 15% efficiency in terms of feed efficiency on cattle that are given growth implants. So we do use growth implants, but the cattle that we send to the feed yard, we do run through an NHTC program. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. I think consumer choice is a good thing, and having the ability to meet consumer demand is something that we strive to do on our operation. Our cattle that go to the feedlot are graded when they're harvested. So we sell our cattle on the grid, which means we are getting paid for the quality of our animals. So that quality would either be quality grade such as prime, which is your highest marbled cattle, beef quality grade that you would get, very great quality meat, very high end meat, and then choice or select. And so I'm proud to say that over the last 5 years that I've been retaining ownership, the focus on genetics, we've seen tremendous premiums coming from the grid in terms of cattle that we send out that grade prime and choice. And we have a lot of cattle that we see grade prime. And over the years that we have been doing this, we've also seen tremendous advantages in terms of the genetics that we've been buying in terms of performance, average daily gain, feed efficiency. So another area that we focus on from a sustainability standpoint. So we are very conscious about sustainability on this farm, and I know that's very important to all of us as we are consumers of this great product that we produce.
Awesome. Thank you. One question. So on our dairy farm today, Sean had a set of twins born and was bottle feeding them. Are there ever situations in beef operations where you have to, the mothers aren't able to care for the calves, or you have to bottle feed them?
Well, very good question, Taylor. And you've probably already seen the video. We actually, as I mentioned, we calve both in the spring and the fall, and we target calving in the fall to start August 15th. And our goal is to try to get 80% of our calf crop, which in the first 21 days, which is the cycle, the estrous cycle of cows, and keep our calving window very tight. And this fall, we actually, typically, spring and fall, we will have a cow for whatever reason. Sometimes a cow will sometimes get sick, or she will, from time to time, you'll have a cow that won't claim a calf, or from time to time you have a cow that will have twins. And sometimes cows that have twins, it's hard for the cow to maintain both calves. We had actually a heifer, so it'd be a first calf mama that calved this year that had twins. And since she was a first calf mama, she might have been able to take care of both calves, but since she was it's her first time calving, we felt it was the right thing to do to pull one of those calves off to allow her to have her first calf with only one calf that she's milking. And so, as you've seen in the video of my kids milking, providing milk, bottle feeding the other calf, that's the calf that we pulled off the mama to give her a chance to really take care of one calf. And so that's always a great thing it's a great project for kids. And on the farm, there's always projects for kids and responsibilities. And that's one that my kids love to do, is to feed the bottle calf morning and evening. When they get off of school, the first thing they do is they're out the door, heading out to bottle feed the calf. So from time to time, it does happen on a beef farm. We oftentimes will have a situation where something will go wrong. It could happen during calving where potentially the cow could die. It doesn't happen very often. And again, that's why we look for, when we're looking for data on purchasing high genetic bulls, we're looking for bulls with calving ease, which is a trait that's hereditary, and will help us in terms of making sure that we don't have any calving problems. But from time to time, you do have those problems on a beef operation.
So is that something that you can select for? Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned you look for that. What do you mean by that?
So that's exactly right, Taylor. When I'm looking at genetic evaluation, so in selecting genetic sires, there is a data sheet that we call expected progeny differences. So what we expect to be different out of the progeny that will come out of the sires that we purchase. There's a range of data points that we look at, and you can get data points that look at about anything you want to look at, from feed efficiency to the maternal characteristics that would come out of a sire for turning heifers into cows, to terminal traits. And so one of the things that we look at really closely on our operation is a trait around calving ease. We shoot for a 95% calf crop, which means 95% of the cows that are bred have calves and are weaned. And so one of the traits that we look at is calving ease, to ensure that one, having a live calf is the first step in having a calf period. And so we look at that trait as one of the first traits that we look at. And then from there, we go on into feed efficiency, and then other traits, terminal traits, such as your quality, beef quality traits, such as intramuscular fat and ribeye area and things to that nature. But calving ease is absolutely important in terms of the selection criteria that we look at.
Awesome. It sounds like that's definitely useful to have available when you're looking at building your herd. So we have talked a little bit, you've focused in on a lot of different areas, but let's talk big picture for a minute. What's the day-to-day operation look like on your farm?
So the day-to-day operation will vary from time of year. You start out in January. Typically, we start feeding hay in January. I start spring calving about the 15th of February. And we'll start spring calving, usually wrap up spring calving in April, May. In the springtime, obviously, we're involved in planting crops, applying fertility for our hay that we're going to bale in the summertime. June timeframe, May and June, we're harvesting our forage from our cover crops, and then going in planting corn, soybeans. Then we're also baling hay for our winter hay stock. As we get into the summertime, we start buying a lot of stocker cattle that we'll carry through the rest of the year. We're working cattle on this operation. We're working cattle about once a week, vaccinating, providing the necessary checks and balances, checking cows. Every day, cattle have to be checked, either during calving time or even on a normal day, checking cows to make sure calves aren't getting sick. Running through cattle every day. Fences, keeping up with fences is always a chore. As I mentioned, we've got roughly about 1,000 acres, and keeping up with fences on that many acres can be a challenge, especially when we really only have about 2 or 3 of us that are doing the work. Get in the fall, obviously quite calving. We're getting ready to start harvest here before too long of corn and soybeans. And then as we move into the winter time, we're preg checking cows, vaccinating the mama cows, getting them ready for wintertime, deworming. And so there's never a dull moment on the farm. There's always something to do, always something to take care of, always something to fix, whether it's equipment or taking care of cattle, whether it's sick or providing vaccinations.
So we have a question coming, kind of a general one. So how is the industry maintaining family versus corporate farming? And then also, what resources would be available? What would you suggest to someone who's looking to start their own operation?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Well, approximately 97% of all farms are family-owned farms. So here, in the area that I live, all of the neighbors that I have are all family operations. They have all been involved in farming for many years. It is truthfully, it is challenging to get involved in farming as a young person, to be honest with you. There are resources available for young and beginning farmers. And there are resources either through USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. Here in Missouri, we have some resources available through our Missouri Department of Agriculture. There are some financial institutions that offer young farmer loans for farmers to get involved in farming. And it's definitely possible. I meet from time to time people that are first generation farmers. In fact, I've got a friend of mine, two friends of mine, in fact, that are first generation farmers, and they started out from scratch. It's a lot of work, and the risk factor is very high. That's probably the biggest challenge for a young farmer, and really a seasoned farmer, a farmer that's been in business for a long time. The risk factor is really high. One, it's very high capital intensive work in terms of the cost of investment to get in. Whether it's buying the resources or the equipment that we have to use, it's very expensive. But it's also very risky from the standpoint, markets move up and down quickly. Markets can react to just the craziest thing. I look back to how the markets reacted during COVID. And other economic situations or weather situations, or various events such as a global event, whether it be a terrorist attack. Markets can react pretty quick, and that's one of the risks that many farmers have is how markets can fluctuate up and down very rapidly. And when you're in the cattle business, oftentimes you're selling. When your cattle are ready to sell, you have to sell. I mean, you can't sit on those cattle because they'll get too big. So you have to move them, you have to sell them, and sometimes you have to take whatever the market gives you at that time. And so that's why, in our operation, we look at different marketing arrangements, whether it's looking at marketing at different times of the year. We look at different enterprises, both the cow-calf enterprise, but also the stocker enterprise. We mix in row crops to diversify our operation. And then we're also looking at different niche markets like the NHTC marketing opportunity that we do, and retaining ownership to try to pull down some of those premium dollars that we get from raising high quality genetic cattle. But it's very, there's a lot of challenges that come along with farming and ranching with respect to risk. But it's a great place to live and raise a family. The responsibility and the values that have been passed on to me as a cow-calf rancher and producer, and the values that I'm able to, and the responsibility that I'm able to pass on to kids in terms of work ethic and just responsibility of taking care of things, whether it's the land that we have or it's the cattle that we have. It's truly a good skill and gift to pass on to future generations.
Thank you, Devin. Yeah, as Devin said, it can be hard to get into, but there are different financial resources and educational resources for people who want to get into farming. Another question, Devin, what would you say to someone who may have concerns about hormones, antibiotics, stuff like that in their meat, since you mentioned you do use those on your operation?
Absolutely. So one thing I would say is, with using growth implants, the growth implants that we use is an estrogen implant, and it's just a very small dose that is residual and will just over time continue to elevate the current hormone that's already in the animal. So it's not a different hormone; it's already occurring within the animal. And in some cases, you will have beef that were not implanted, that are harvested, that actually have higher levels of hormones than the beef that was giving, the cattle that were given hormones. So it's the level of hormones that are coming from the growth implant are not very high at all. But if there's still a concern, one of the things I would say is, again, consumer choice is a good thing. And, we in the beef industry, we will meet the needs of the consumer, whatever that need may be. If it's has not been given any hormones, we have that option. If it's a grass-finished beef, we have that option. Conventional beef, consumer choice is a good thing. So that's how I would just encourage that consumer to, do a little research on it. And at the end of the day, you still have the choice to decide, which type of beef you would prefer.
Thank you, Devin. That's a great answer and a great point to make. That while there are cattle producers finish on grain. If you prefer grass-fed, there's that option. There's the hormone-free, antibiotic-free. So that's awesome to keep in mind, that consumer choice is a big thing. And there's a lot of ways in the beef industry that they're meeting the need of all the different consumer preferences. Does anyone have any other questions for Davin? Feel free to put them in the question and answer here shortly. Anything else you'd like to share, Davin?
The only thing I would just share again, it's been a privilege to be with you all today, and I certainly wish you all could be out here with us. Sometimes the virtual component's hard to get a really good feel for, the tour, the operation that we're part of. But I would just finish off by saying I truly do value what you all do. Health is an important thing for all of us. And what you all are getting ready to do is such a noble professional career. And I look at my own health as something that is very important to me. I try to work out every day. My family and I were very active. But we also know that the food choices that we make are important to us as well. And in our family, we eat beef almost every day, and it's a very important nutritious component of our family meal. And beef, regardless of how it's produced, is absolutely safe, and it's very nutritious and wholesome, and it's absolutely important for consumers to take a look at, because it's a great source of protein, and it's a great source of many other nutrients, and we as producers take it very serious in terms of how we get it to you as consumers. And thank you all very much for taking the time to be with me today. And at any time, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to engage with you at any time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Davin. We really appreciate your time today, taking us around your operation and kind of letting us on the inside of your farm. We had questions or comment in the question and answer, thanking everyone for their time today. It seems like people have really enjoyed the program. And to the participants, thank you so much for choosing to attend today. You all had great questions. I know I learned a lot today. I hope you all did too. And had a lot of fun. I think this is a great event. As Amanda and Davin had said, we would love to be out on the farm, but hopefully even getting these visuals in front of you will help you all have a better understanding and learn a lot from this. So if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask today, mine and Amanda's contact information is on the screen currently, both of our email addresses. Feel free to shoot us any questions you have for us or for the producers today. We're happy to reach out to the producers and get answers back to your programs as well on those. And once again, don't forget, we are doing a prize drawing for those who fill out the post-event survey, which will pop up in your browser when you exit the meeting. It should take just a few minutes of your time, and it really helps us get a gauge for what did you enjoy today, what didn't you enjoy, and what can we improve in the future. So we just want to see what you all thought of it. So fill that out. There's some great prizes. We have a beef swag bag with different things, and as Amanda said, a cheese box of Missouri cheeses. So that's definitely a great incentive. So be sure to fill out the survey, and just thank you again for attending. We really appreciate it.